Hello, everyone. Welcome back to The Victim's Voice. I'm your host, Lorelei. In this week's episode, I want to discuss a case that's been circulating in the media and the craziness that is ensuing. Because of this circus, everyone seems to be forgetting about the victim, Austin Metcalf, the 17-year-old student who lost his life on April 2nd, 2025, in Frisco, Texas, while at a track meet for school. Instead of making this the main focus, all of the racial grifters and hustlers on both sides are coming out of the woodwork to try to profit off of the victim's family and the family of the perpetrator. They're trying to turn this tragedy into a racial war, when in reality, this didn't start out as a racial issue at all. We're going to begin with what the police reports say happened when officers got to the scene that day. On April 2nd, 2025, at 10:01 a.m., School Resource Officer E. Cortez from Staley Middle School heard a call over the radio that an athlete had been stabbed at David Kuykendall Stadium, which was located next to the middle school. The suspect was said to be a black male with dreads in his hair wearing a gray hoodie and blue sweatpants. Cortez left his office and ran across the middle school parking lot through the southwest entrance that led to the stadium. As he entered the stadium, two high school students pointed him in the direction of the victim, who was on the north end of the stadium, which was the visitors' side, by the bleachers under a Memorial High School tent. As Cortez got close to the north end, he could see the tent with multiple people standing underneath of it. As he approached, an adult male on the track pointed out the suspect. Cortez instructed the suspect to put his hands up. The suspect did as he was told, but as he did it, he said, "I was protecting myself." He offered up this information without Cortez asking him any questions. Cortez then asked the suspect if he had any weapons on him, to which he said no. As Cortez was putting him in handcuffs, he offered up more information. He said that the victim had put his hands on him, and that's why he stabbed him. Cortez hadn't read him his rights yet, so he didn't respond to anything that the suspect was saying at the time. He instructed the suspect to sit on the ground while he conducted another pat down on him. During this time, police officer Allison Rickey arrived on scene. The suspect, though, just couldn't keep his mouth shut, because as Cortez reported that he had the alleged suspect detained, the suspect said, "I'm not alleged, I did it." Cortez and Rickey then started to walk the suspect to Officer Rickey's squad car. During that walk, he became very emotional. He asked them if what he had done could be considered self-defense. The officers replied by telling him that they didn't know what had happened at that point, and so they couldn't make that call. Cortez noticed blood on the hand of the suspect as they put him in the car. The officer made sure to get video of it with his body cam. They asked him if he was doing okay, and right about that time, the suspect started crying hysterically. After he calmed down, some law enforcement asked for his ID and found out that his name was Carmelo Anthony and that he was 17 years old. Officer Rickey and Cortez then transported Carmelo to the Frisco Police Department jail. After arriving, they took the clothes that he had been wearing as evidence. Back at the stadium, emergency personnel were gathered around the stabbing victim and trying to save his life. Sergeant Otis had arrived on the scene by this time. As the Frisco Fire Department and other athletic department staff were providing care to the victim, the sky opened up and a downpour of rain came. The school staff moved the memorial team tent that the kids had been under over the victim and the first responders. Sergeant Otis secured the area with crime scene tape and asked anyone who was not essential in helping the victim to move out of the area. He then began taking pictures to preserve the scene because of the weather and the amount of people who were there. People who were nearby told Sergeant Otis that they believed the murder weapon was still in the vicinity of the bleachers. After looking for a short time, Officer Otis ended up finding a black-handled folding knife. It was lying between bleachers 9 and 10 near seat 30 by the aisle. Instead of picking up the knife, Sergeant Otis decided to leave it where it had been thrown. He covered it with a blue tarp to preserve it from the weather or from other people touching it. Officer Wetzel was another officer on scene who wrote a report about what he had witnessed that day. He was near the visitor's side where the victim was being attended to under the tent. One of the members of the Memorial High School track team came up to Wetzel and started telling him what he had witnessed that morning. The witness stated that he had been sitting under the Memorial High School tent near the victim, who he identified as Austin Metcalf, and the suspect, Carmelo Anthony. Carmelo was from Centennial High School, but for some reason was sitting under the Memorial High School tent. Austin told Carmelo that he needed to move out from under their team's tent. Carmelo did not move, but instead grabbed his backpack, unzipped it, and reached his hand inside, while saying, "Touch me and see what happens." The witness said that no one really thought that Carmelo had a weapon in his book bag. He said that Austin did touch Carmelo, that Carmelo was getting mouthy according to witnesses, so Austin did give Carmelo a little shove to try to get him to leave. That's when Carmelo said, "Punch me and see what happens." A little bit later, Austin grabbed Carmelo again and told him to move. This is when Carmelo Anthony reached his hand back into his book bag and pulled out a black-handled knife, stabbed Austin once in the chest, and then ran away. Austin grabbed his chest and told everyone to get help. Everyone that they interviewed who had been under the tent gave pretty much the same version of events, with some minor details being different depending on where everyone was and what they saw. The basic difference being one witness said Austin touched him and another said he pushed him. Either way, instead of just getting up and moving to his own tent, Carmelo stabbed a student because after the student asked him to move, he got mouthy, and it seemed he already was planning to do something because, for one, he brought the knife to a school event, and he reached in his book bag before Austin ever touched him. Then he taunted Austin by saying, "Touch me and see what happens." It doesn't sound like someone who was scared for their life to me. Authorities tried to talk to Hunter, Austin's identical twin brother. However, he was too hysterical to be much of any help at all. He did, however, do an interview the next day with TMZ. He said, quote, "We asked Anthony to move. He started getting aggressive and talking reckless. And my brother stepped in and said, 'You need to move.' And he's like, 'Make me move.' All of a sudden, he grabbed his backpack." End quote. Immediately after that, Hunter said he realized his brother had been stabbed. Hunter estimated that the entire altercation lasted less than 30 seconds and said neither he nor Austin had any history with Carmelo Anthony. Other witnesses were also saying that Austin and Carmelo were exchanging words back and forth, and that Austin eventually stood up to push Carmelo, and that's when Carmelo took out the knife and stabbed Austin. But overall, no one saw Austin with any sort of weapon, no one heard Austin threaten Carmelo with a weapon, and there was no other weapon found at the scene, except for the one that Carmelo had used to stab Austin. When officers got to the scene, they were informed that Austin was no longer breathing or conscious. Hunter had held his brother in his arms and put his hands over his brother's wound to try to stop the blood from flowing out. When the paramedics came to take over, they had to pry Hunter off of Austin so that they could administer first aid. Austin was rushed to the hospital where he succumbed to his injuries shortly after arriving. Carmelo Anthony was booked into jail and charged with first-degree murder. And this is where things start to get crazy. First, let's talk about who the victim was. Austin Metcalf was a 17-year-old junior from Frisco, Texas. He was a member of Memorial High School's track and field team, a team MVP as a linebacker on the varsity football team, and a member of the National Honor Society. He was an excellent student with a nearly 4.0 GPA. Hunter Metcalf said in an interview that he and his brother did everything together. They were best friends and were like one person. Hunter had recently achieved his goals in the gym, and he remembered that his brother had hugged him and told him how proud he was of him. Hunter not only had to grieve losing a part of himself on April 2nd, but he will never forget holding his dying brother in his arms. Hopefully, he realizes that his face was probably the last thing his brother saw before he lost consciousness, and he now has a guardian angel forever. Carmelo Anthony was at first appointed a public defender, and his bond was set at $1 million. On April 14th, however, he appeared in court with his newly hired attorney, Mike Howard, and his bond was lowered to $250,000, which was paid and he was released. Carmelo was issued an electronic monitoring device and is on house arrest. He can only leave for court hearings and must be supervised by a parent or guardian at all times. He also has to check in with court bailiffs every Friday. If you have seen the news footage of Carmelo being released and leaving the courthouse, then I'm sure you saw the clown that was leading him out by the hand like a little boy who is in trouble. This man's name is Dominique Alexander, and he has been hired by the family to represent them. He's not an attorney, but just a representative, I guess. I'm not really sure what he is doing for them. In my opinion, he is Timu's version of Al Sharpton. We will talk more about him shortly. Because Carmelo was black and Austin was white, this immediately became a racial issue from the start, even though the incident had nothing to do with race. Because of this, there's been a huge divide between people. Some say that Carmelo acted in self defense, while others say that Austin was killed in cold blood. I will tell you my opinion on everything later, if you don't figure it out from my smart assiness before then. We all know that whenever there is a tragedy, GoFundMe's or something similar usually start popping up everywhere, and it's no different in this case. The GoFundMe for the Metcalf family has raised over $400,000. What we don't usually see is a fundraiser from the other party's side, the person who committed the crime. But because this case has caused a racial divide of some sort, people have been donating to Carmelo's family also, by way of Give Send Go. He has also raised close to $400,000 last time I checked. It may be more now. People started talking about the Anthony family's donations, though, claiming that they aren't using it on Carmelo's defense, but instead have a new house lined up to move into and are buying new cars. I don't necessarily know if any of this is true because, first of all, it's a process to be able to withdraw funds from these organizations, and it's also a process to purchase a house. I don't think either of these things are happening that fast. However, the Anthony family is apparently really worried about what the public thinks of them because they held a whole ass press conference to let people know that they weren't buying cars and houses, something that they could have done in a written statement. After listening to this press conference, however, I don't believe it was only because of those rumors that they held it. It seems like to me they are trying to reverse the roles and make themselves and their murderer of a son the victims in this situation. It's disgusting, and the whole press conference just had an icky feeling about it. If you haven't seen it, I will share the link on the Victim's Voice Facebook page. So, this shit show of a press conference happened on April 17th. And the first thing that happened was that there was a 45-minute delay to the press conference beginning. There are several red flags indicating that this press conference was nothing but a circus. And here is the first reason. Press conference didn't start on time because Austin Metcalf's dad had shown up, and the Anthonys and their douchebag representative had the audacity to call the police to have him escorted out. Yes, this family's son killed this man's son in cold blood, but instead of welcoming him with open arms and apologizing for their son's actions, they call the police and have him removed from their press conference. And guess what? When Jeff Metcalf was asked to leave, he left without even stabbing anyone. That's amazing. I could understand it if Jeff Metcalf had gone there to cause problems, but he didn't. He had already said in a media interview that he forgave Carmelo for what he did to his son, and that he did not want this to become about race from either side. He told a reporter, quote, "We have got to be kind to each other. You need to show compassion, show empathy, not anger, not rage. Teach your kids right from wrong and pray to God this doesn't happen to yours." End quote. He said he wanted to go to the press conference because, yes, he was interested in what they had to say. But he also wanted to show that the two families could stand side by side and put on a united front. The Anthonys and their phony ass representative, though, weren't going to allow that to happen. They had an agenda and a narrative to put out there. And Austin's dad didn't fit the message that they were trying to convey. Douchebag Dominic Alexander started off the press conference by saying, quote, "What we've seen at the beginning of this press conference, of the father being at this press conference, these are my words, don't quote anybody, is a disrespect to the dignity of his son." End quote. What? How is he being disrespectful to his son that was murdered by the person this guy represents? Alexander then said, quote, "Next Generation Action Network," this is the name of his so-called organization, and believe me, this won't be the last time you hear it come from his mouth. It will be ingrained in your brain by the time we're done, which I'm sure is what he wants. Anyway, he says, "Next Generation Action Network, from the beginning, has respected the loss of life, no matter our opinion of it. We have kept our opinions close. We have not attacked. We have not shared the information that was shared with us about Austin Metcalf because we respect the dignity of life and loss." So it sounds like Dominic Alexander was trying to low key make people think they had some tea on Austin Metcalf. After talking shit about the Metcalfs and trying to defame them for a while, he got into the meat and potatoes of why they were there, which was to play the victims and to complain that they were being harassed by people both online and in person. While I don't agree with anyone going real life and threatening anyone, why are these people so worried about what people are thinking of them and their son? They didn't do Carmelo any favors by hiring this racial grifter piece of crap to represent them, when he is only doing it to get a cut of the donated money and to plug his organization, which is the second red flag we're going to talk about. I eventually lost count of how many times this idiot said the name of his organization, but I was able to count 12 times. Was he really there for the family, or was he there to plug his company? Also, does the name of his organization, Next Generation Action Network, remind you of anything? How about Al Sharpton's National Action Network? Sounds like Mr. Alexander, or should I say Minister Dominic Alexander, because yes, according to his Twitter page, he's a minister. Sounds like he couldn't even be original with the name of his racial grifting organization. He is definitely the Timu version of Al Sharpton. The next red flag is unbelievable. This man actually blamed the school for what happened at the track meet. How was it the school's fault, you may ask? Well, of course, it's because they didn't cancel the track meet because of the weather. As Milli Vanilli said, he blamed it on the rain. According to Dominic Alexander, you can't run track in the rain or even if there are clouds in the sky. So if they would have canceled the meet, this would have never happened. Seriously, this guy needs to set down. I don't see how Carmelo's lawyer is allowing this to happen because this guy is making this entire family look really bad. The next red flag was when he had the audacity to complain about the school wanting to expel Carmelo for the remainder of the school year. First of all, Carmelo even having a knife on school property is enough for expulsion, but killing someone, that takes it to the whole new level. So all the other students should have to fear for their lives at school so that Carmelo can continue to attend so that he can graduate with his class? What if someone accidentally bumps into him in the hallway? Will he pull out a weapon and kill them? And what about Austin? He doesn't get to return to school. He doesn't get to graduate with his class. He never gets to get married, have children, have a career, nothing. His life is over. But poor Carmelo gets expelled 2 months before he graduates. Well, if you would like to graduate with the rest of your class, then my suggestion is not to stab people in the heart and kill them. The next red flag is Dominic Alexander racializing this case, talking about his oppressors and how they don't have to pull the race card because they live it. This case has nothing to do with race. There is no excuse for what Carmelo did. Wrong is wrong. I don't care if you're black, white, green, yellow, or purple. Jeff Metcalf made it very clear that this had nothing to do with race and that he didn't want people to make it about that from either side, which we will talk about the other side of the racial grifters in a little bit. Jeff also said straight from the gate that he forgave Carmelo for what he did to his son and that he wanted to bridge the gap and show people that the two families could come together. Yet when they should have been asking for his forgiveness and apologizing to him, they removed him from their three-ring circus. Though Alexander said that he was sorry about the loss of Jeff's son, you would think that this loser would at least make sure he got the victim's name correct. But he didn't. Instead of saying Metcalf, he said Metcalf at least 3 different times when referring to Austin. He is disgusting. Then this clown shows just how much he doesn't know. He started comparing what Carmelo did to Kyle Rittenhouse in Wisconsin. He said that Carmelo deserves the same rights as Kyle had. Well, let's talk about that. Kyle Rittenhouse had a bond of $2 million, and his bond never got lowered. But Carmelo had a $1 million bond that was lowered to $250,000. Kyle Rittenhouse was jailed for 86 days. Carmelo was jailed for 12. And Kyle Rittenhouse was acting in self-defense. One guy pointed a gun at him, another tried to hit him with a skateboard, and the other tried to take his weapon from him. Also, people were saying that Kyle killed 3 black people, which is not true. All 3 of the people Rittenhouse killed were white. So how do you compare the two situations when they are totally different? In my opinion, Minister Dominique Alexander was using this appalling press conference to stoke the fire of this being a racial incident in order to promote his organization and to try to get the family more donations so that he could take his cut. But they also were really worried about their image because at least 3 different times they brought up the fact that people were saying that they were spending the donation money in ways they shouldn't. So, who is this phony grifter that the Carmelo's parents have representing them? Well, I don't think they did their homework because this man is not someone who should be in any kind of leadership position or who should be representing a child in any way. He is a felon with a rap sheet as long as a CVS receipt, yet served almost no jail time. Let's talk about what this jackass has done in the past. Dominique Alexander has at least 10 mugshots from what I could find and a whole lot of felony charges. I will post them on the Victim's Voice Facebook page. So what kind of trouble has this minister been in? Well, back in 2009, Dominique Alexander was charged with felony injury to a child. Apparently, this man shook his girlfriend's son and hit him with an object, causing tearing in the child's cerebral cortex. He at first tried to say the child fell off the couch. He was convicted by a Dallas court in 2011 and received probation. He broke that probation in 2016 due to multiple other charges, which included forging a check, leading police on a high-speed chase, stealing a car, falsifying a claim that a car was stolen, offensive physical contact, probation violation, felony theft of property, felony assault causing seriously bodily injury. This was for domestic violence against his girlfriend, so he likes to abuse children and women. Continuous violence against the family, theft, making false reports, and evading arrest. Why would these parents, who claim to be intelligent people, let this person with this kind of background represent their family? Alexander did most of the talking at the press conference, while Carmelo's parents stood behind him looking sad and like it was their son that was murdered and not the murderer. When Alexander was done, Carmelo's mom, Kayla Hayes, came up to talk. And boy, was she on point with the victim mentality. She continued on about how her and her family felt like they were in danger. According to her, over the past several days, there had been an alarming increase in death threats, continued harassment, and physical intimidation targeted at their home. Some of the harassment included people visiting the Anthony home, loitering, and taking photos of their property, false food deliveries, disturbing mailings, including Austin Metcalf's obituary, and people repeatedly circling the family home, taking photos and attempting to provoke fear and intimidation. Kayla then went on to talk about being a stay at home mom and how her family moved to the area 3 years before to have a better life. She said they have been doxxed and her husband had to take a leave of absence from work. She then started yelling, saying her 13-year-old daughter is scared to sleep in her own room. Well, ma'am, whose fault is that? Maybe you should be blaming your son who stabbed someone at a school event on school property. Yes, people are pissed. She says she doesn't know why people are discriminating against her and her family before there has ever been a trial. I'm sorry, but your son admitted to stabbing the quote unquote Metcalf boy, as she liked to call him, which in my opinion is disrespectful. Then she, of course, starts talking about the donations, the whole reason for the press conference, their image. They don't want people to think they're misusing funds because then, of course, people wouldn't donate. Carmelo's dad, Andrew Anthony, stood looking like a constipated Urkel lookalike during the press conference. If you watch it, you will know what I mean. He didn't say a word as his wife and Alexander led the shit show. He did make a statement later in a newspaper article for the Post. Here's what he had to say. Quote, everyone has already made their assumptions about my son, but he's not what they're making him out to be. He's a good kid. He works 2 jobs. He's an A student and has a 3.7 GPA. End quote. And sir, he also stabs kids in the heart when he doesn't get his way. You left that out. Andrew added that Carmelo was, quote unquote, not the aggressor, and quote unquote, not the one who started the altercation with Austin. He said his son made a mistake in the heat of the moment and that he feels badly for Austin's family. He said, quote, I feel bad for the other parents and family, and words can't explain how both families have been affected by this tragedy, end quote. First of all, good for Carmelo that he works 2 jobs and had a 3.7 GPA. That just means he's smart enough to know that you don't bring a knife to a school event and attack someone, killing them in the process. And saying that he wasn't the aggressor and not the one who started the altercation? Sir, maybe he didn't put hands on Austin first, but he was running his mouth and taunting Austin, daring him to touch him. To claim self-defense, you have to prove that you are fearing for your life, or you fear great bodily harm. Carmelo could have walked away from the situation at any time, and Austin didn't have a weapon on him. You're allowed to protect yourself, but you have to use reasonable and proportional force. It all boils down to the saying that you can't bring a gun to a fist fight. And Carmelo was no angel before this. It's been said that he got into an altercation at school in February and was suspended. Now, I've heard that he had a weapon on him during this altercation, but I can't say 100% if that's the case. But it's also been said that he wasn't even supposed to be at the track meet because he was suspended from school. Maybe that's why he was taking shelter in another school's tent, because his teammates under his own school's tent knew he wasn't supposed to be there. I don't know for sure, that's just a thought. Carmelo is definitely not an angel, though. There's a picture going around of him where he's holding an assault rifle and throwing up a gang sign. And of course, people are trying to compare it to a picture of Austin and Hunter Metcalf wearing camo and holding hunting rifles. There's obviously a big difference between hunting and throwing gang signs. Comparing those 2 pictures is just ridiculous. And let's back up for a minute to when Jeff Metcalf was asked to leave the press conference. Just a few hours after being asked to leave, his house was swatted. For those of you who don't know what swatting is, that's okay, I didn't either until now. The definition of swatting is the action or practice of making a prank call to 911 in an attempt to bring about the dispatch of a large number of armed police officers or a SWAT team to a particular address. Someone had called 911 and said that they heard gunshots coming from inside of Jeff's home. There have been two other reported swatting incidents involving the Metcalf family, one on April 8th at Austin's mom's house, and another one at Jeff's house on the 25th. This family is grieving the loss of their son and brother, and these low-life people who think they're being funny by making false claims to police won't leave them alone to grieve in peace. People like this are sickening. Racial hustlers like Dominic Alexander are only half of the problem, though. We still have the other side of the racial extremists to talk about. A small group of people gathered at Kai Kendall Stadium in Frisco on Saturday, April 19th of 2025, just 2 days after Dominic Alexander's press conference. People were making posts about the gathering on social media. The flyers posted on social media said, "Protect white Americans, justice for Austin Metcalf, demand Carmelo Anthony be put back in prison until trial, peaceful protest, stop black violence on white Americans." The rally was organized by Jake Lang of Florida and his sidekick, Philip Anderson, who people have been calling Uncle Ruckus. And if you recognize these names, it's because they were two of the men who were previously charged in the January 6th riot in the U.S. Capitol. Two of the men whom President Trump pardoned, and these guys are no better than Dominic Alexander. Lang and Anderson delivered speeches suggesting black Americans are disproportionately violent toward white Americans because of what he called white hate. What's odd is that Jeff Lang is white and Philip Anderson is black. Protesters voiced anger over Carmelo Anthony's release on bond, calling for him to be put back in prison until trial. A video went viral of a man named Bruce Carter, who is a black man, confronting Jake Lang and his losers at the rally. Bruce Carter had actually been at the press conference held by Dominic Alexander and the Anthony family. This is where he met Austin's dad, Jeff Metcalf. The two later decided that Carter would speak with Jeff Lang on Jeff Metcalf's behalf at the protest. Bruce Carter is a Dallas entrepreneur who owns a public relations firm, according to his website. He has been active in local politics and has campaigned for President Donald Trump. In the past, he ran a group called Black Men for Bernie, referring to Senator Bernie Sanders. According to Jeff Lang and his cronies, Austin Metcalf was now a symbol of a violent black culture being perpetuated against white America. Bruce asked Jeff Lang if he had permission from Jeff Metcalf to use Austin in his money-making racial fiascos. Jake admitted to Bruce that he had not talked to Jeff. So, Bruce called Jeff right there so that he could talk to him. He also had it on speaker so everyone could hear Jeff's response to Jake. This is what Jeff said, quote, "You are part of the fucking problem. You are trying to create more racial divide than bridging the gap. I do not condone anything you do. You take my son's face off of your website," end quote. Jake Lang had the audacity to respond to Jeff by saying that he needed to be a father and that he had, quote unquote, white guilt. He told Jeff if he didn't jump on board, then there would be more Austins in the future, and basically said it would be Jeff's fault. In the weeks following Austin Metcalf's murder, it seemed like something new was being posted every day in regards to the case. False posts impersonating the Frisco police chief and posts targeting the judge presiding over Anthony's case have become the subject of criminal investigations. People have doxed Judge Angela Tucker, the judge who lowered Carmelo's bond. The Metcalfs are meanwhile trying to deal with the grief of losing their son while at the same time being dragged into a culture war. They are having to deal with swatting incidents and these racial hustlers that are trying to make a buck in a statement using their deceased son, all while grieving the loss of Austin. There have even been rumors on social media that Jeff Metcalf had been arrested in 2011 for sexual assault, which has been found to be untrue. Carmelo Anthony's family has had to move because of threats. Even though, in my opinion, he murdered Austin and it was no way self defense, that doesn't make it okay for the rest of his family to be harassed and threatened. I believe this all started because of people like Dominique Alexander and Jake Lang, people who want to turn everything into a race war to fit their own agenda and to make money. And if the Anthony family continues to let Alexander represent their family, it's only going to make things worse for them and Carmelo. All of this is going too far, and someone else eventually is going to get hurt or even worse before it's over. In the end, this is about Austin, a 17-year-old who lost his life senselessly. But that seems to be forgotten in all of the mockery and racial propaganda engineered by people who lead these hate groups. The Metcalfs need to be left alone so they can grieve the loss of Austin and focus on Hunter's mental health and the fact that he lost his best friend, his identical twin, that he now has to learn to navigate through life without. The Anthonys need to be left alone so they can deal with the fact that their 17-year-old son is now labeled a cold blooded murderer. And if they were smart, they would get rid of Dominic Alexander and not allow him to speak for their family anymore. I will keep you updated on this case. For photos and clips from this episode, check out the victim's voice on Facebook, Instagram, and X, and come back in 2 weeks for a brand new case. Until then, stay safe and peace out.